400,000 tons. That is the weight of the rock that was removed from a single mountain in western India, somewhere between 600 and 750 AD, without explosives, without machinery, without so much as a wheeled cart to carry the debris away. The structure left behind is twice the size of the Parthenon in Athens. It stands 30 meters tall. It has a courtyard large enough to swallow a city block. It contains intricate carvings, deities, elephants, mythological battles, rendered with a level of precision that modern sculptors describe as breathtaking. And here is the part that stops engineers cold. It was not built upward. It was carved downward. Every single element, the pillars, the towers, the bridges, the shrines, was sculpted from the top of a cliff, working their way into the mountain, removing rock they could never put back.
This is the Kailasa Temple at Ellora. It is, by almost any measure, the most audacious construction project in human history. And today, we are going to find out how and whether it was actually possible. To understand just how extraordinary Kailasa Temple is, you need to understand the fundamental rule that governs almost every form of construction ever attempted by human beings. You build up, you lay a foundation, you stack, you assemble. If you make a mistake, you remove the wrong piece and replace it. Kailasa breaks every single one of those rules. The craftsmen of the Rashtrakuta dynasty, who commissioned this temple around 756 AD under King Dantidurga, completed under Krishna I, began at the top of a basalt cliff face and worked their way down and inward. They had to envision the entire finished structure in 3 dimensions before they removed a single chip of stone. Every pillar, every doorway, every carved deity was locked inside that mountain, and their job was not to build it, but to reveal it. The numbers are worth repeating: 276 feet long, 154 feet wide, 100 feet tall at its highest tower, the Shikara, designed to represent Mount Kailash, the mythological home of the god Shiva. The entire site was carved from a single, continuous rock formation. Now, here is what makes this truly disorienting for modern engineers. The structural logic is flawless. The load-bearing columns are correctly spaced. The overhangs are precisely calculated. The drainage system channels cut into the rock to prevent rainwater from pooling still functions today. Over 12 centuries later, this is not primitive work. This is the product of an extraordinary intellectual tradition in structural planning, one that modern architects have spent decades trying to reverse engineer, and they did it according to the best historical estimates in approximately 18 years. At a rate of roughly 5 feet of rock excavated per day, working across dozens of points simultaneously, coordinating hundreds, if not thousands of workers on a 3-dimensional project with zero tolerance for structural error. If a single load-bearing pillar had been cut too thin, the entire rock face above it could have collapsed. The temple would not be damaged. It would be rubble. There would be nothing to fix. They never made that mistake. Not once. In archaeology, when you remove rock, the rock goes somewhere. You find tailings, the chips and blocks of excavated material piled near the site. At Kailasa, the volume removed is equivalent to roughly 160,000 dump truck loads of material. And yet, the archaeological record around the temple is notably clean. There are a few working theories. The first, and most likely, the basalt was systematically transported away and used elsewhere as raw material. For other construction projects across the Deccan Plateau, basalt is an excellent building material. It is entirely plausible that the rock was redistributed across dozens of sites over decades, leaving no single visible debris field. The second theory: some debris was used to fill in and level the surrounding landscape, effectively absorbed into the hillside over time through centuries of erosion and overgrowth. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have, in fact, detected some subsurface anomalies around the site that are consistent with compacted fill material. Neither explanation is satisfying enough to close the question entirely, and that ambiguity is part of what makes Kailasa such a persistent object of fascination. What we can say with confidence is this: the absence of obvious debris does not suggest the impossible. It suggests extraordinary logistical organization, the same organizational capacity that made the temple itself possible in the first place. These were not casual builders. They were operating within a sophisticated civilization with the administrative infrastructure to coordinate massive public works across an entire subcontinent. Kailasa is the crown jewel, but it is not alone. Stretching across a 2-kilometer escarpment in the Sahyadri hills of Maharashtra, there are 34 cave complexes in total, and what makes them remarkable, beyond the engineering, is what they tell us about the civilization that created them. 12 of the caves are Buddhist, carved between the 5th and 7th centuries. 17 are Hindu, including Kailasa. 5 are Jain, some of them as intricately decorated as anything in the Hindu section. And they do not merely coexist. They were built in overlapping time periods, maintained simultaneously, and served by pilgrims of all three traditions who walked the same paths and shared the same hillside, in peace. In an era that we often imagine as defined by religious conflict and rigid social hierarchies, Ellora stands as quiet, irrefutable evidence that something more nuanced was possible. Merchants, scholars, and craftsmen of different faiths collaborated, or at the very least, cohabited, at this site for generations. The caves themselves reinforce the message. Buddhist monasteries, carved in Cave 1, give way, just meters away, to the soaring Hindu iconography of Cave 14. And further along, the Jainendra Sabha in Cave 32, a 2-story monolithic structure, sometimes called Little Kailasa, demonstrates that the tradition of extraordinary rock-cut architecture was shared across belief systems. Ellora is not just an engineering marvel. It is one of the most powerful arguments for pluralism ever left in stone. Whenever a structure like Kailasa enters popular culture, a certain conversation follows. The reasoning usually goes like this. This structure is too precise, too large, too ambitious to have been built by humans using primitive tools. Therefore, something else must explain it. Advanced lost civilizations, ancient alien intervention, some vanished technology that we have since forgotten. These theories are seductive because they start from a real observation. Kailasa is genuinely extraordinary, but the conclusion they reach is both intellectually dishonest and, frankly, an insult to the people who actually built it. Here is what we know about the tools available to the Rashtrakuta craftsmen: iron chisels, hammers, picks, and ropes. The same basic toolkit used to carve stone across the ancient world. And here is what is important about that: those tools, in the hands of sufficiently skilled and organized workers, are entirely adequate for the task. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that experienced stonemasons working in teams can remove basalt at rates consistent with the temple's estimated construction timeline. The precision of the carvings reflects not alien technology, but a tradition of craft knowledge, passed from master to apprentice across generations, a tradition that is, in fact, still alive in parts of India today. What actually required genius was not the technology, it was the planning. The architectural knowledge to design a three-dimensional structure and communicate that design across a workforce of thousands. The project management to coordinate simultaneous work across multiple points on the cliff face without structural interference. The geological expertise to read the basalt and understand where its natural fracture lines ran. This is sophisticated, applied intelligence of the highest order. And attributing it to aliens or lost civilizations does not make the story more impressive. It makes it less. Because the truth is that this was done by human beings in the 8th century, with iron and rope and extraordinary collective will. That is the genuinely astonishing version of this story. And it happens to be the true one. There is a moment in the late afternoon at Ellora when the light changes. The basalt, which reads as grey and austere at midday, begins to absorb the warmth of the sun and turns the color of amber and old copper. The carved figures seem to step slightly forward from the rock face. The shadows deepen inside the mandapas, and for a few minutes it becomes genuinely difficult to believe that you are standing in front of something made by human hands rather than something that simply grew here, fully formed from the earth. That sensation, that disorientation between the natural and the made, was almost certainly intentional. The Rashtrakuta builders wanted to create a mountain, not merely carve into one. The name Kailasa refers to the cosmic peak at the center of the universe in Hindu cosmology. The temple was not meant to represent Mount Kailash. It was meant to be a second sacred peak, summoned from solid rock, placed in the world of human beings so that the divine might be closer. Whether or not you share that cosmological framework, there is something profound in the ambition. In a world that often measures legacy in likes and quarterly earnings, Kailasa Temple asks a different question. What would you build if you were building for eternity? The people who carved this mountain never saw it finished. Historians believe multiple generations of workers and craftsmen contributed to its construction. They began a project knowing they would not live to see its completion, and they built it anyway. With iron, with rope, with 12 centuries worth of patience encoded in stone. The mountain is still here. They won. If Kailasa Temple stopped you in your tracks, if for even a moment it made you reconsider what human beings are capable of, hit the like button. It genuinely helps more people find this kind of history. And if you want to keep exploring the architectural mysteries that the textbooks skip over, from the underground cities of Cappadocia to the megaliths of Puma Punku, subscribe and turn on notifications. We release a new documentary every week. I'll see you in the next one.
Unlocking Secrets of the Past. This is QSTP for you.